Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome to yet another lore video. This is going to be a bit of a special Warhammer lore video, though, as I have with myself a guest that will be taking over the second half of the lore video, because we are going to be doing two lore subjects in one: the Imperial Gunnery School of Newlyn and the College of Engineers. So, without further ado, let us get started. The Imperial Gunnery School of Newlyn is in the province of Wiesenland. It is the Empire's primary and most industrious producer of artillery for the Empire's armies. This includes standard weapons like mortars and cannons, and also more exotic items like Hellblaster volley guns and rocket batteries. In addition to creating these weapons, the Gunnery School is also responsible for training the crews expected to operate and maintain these weapons, as well as the officers to command and direct them. In fact, it could even be argued that these newly trained men is in even higher demand than the cannons themselves, partially because a soldier's life is always somewhat hazardous, and perhaps even more so when asked to handle large quantities of gunpowder that is to be stuffed into a tube, but primarily because experienced and skilled gun crews are highly valued within the Empire, and many would go to great lengths to acquire the best and the brightest, both in terms of men and guns. Additionally, the Gunnery School maintains an extremely stringent education and graduation procedure, and refuses to lower its standards, preferring to produce few, perhaps too few, highly trained crews, rather than, in their own words, a mob of substandard graduates. The gun crews themselves are usually recruited locally from the straight troops or militia, and given adequate, if somewhat basic, training on the weapons they are expected to man, while most of the proper students, those aiming to become the commanders of these guns and their crews, mostly come from Imperial nobility. An education as an engineer of the Imperial Gunnery School does not come cheap, neither in terms of time or money. There is in fact no fixed time frame for the education process, but it will usually take several years, with students beginning their training by being taught how to create and operate simple gunpowder weapons, handguns, pistols, etc., before moving on to the real artillery pieces, their production and of course their capabilities, and naturally the rather considerable amounts of math and ballistic knowledge required to be able to effectively engage targets, a considerably more complicated problem than it may originally seem, as the Warhammer world is of course inhabited by all manners of monstrosities, and the tactics used to hit a block of infantry can be quite different to those required to hit a giant. Additionally, they are of course trained in siegecraft, a field nearly as varied as monster extermination via cannonball. But, of course, theory is not all that is required of the students. They are also required to undergo a period of field testing. During this field testing, they bring along a piece of their choice, a weapon, preferably something self-made, and this could be something as small as a handgun, or they could even bring along a cannon. There's no technical limitations on this, but of course, if you plan to bring along a cannon, well, you're going to have to pay for the transportation, the gunnery crews, etc. And, well, more than likely, your daddy is going to be paying for that, so consider that the I drive a Ferrari to school option. And then, they and their favourite pieces of boom boom wander the Empire looking for opportunities to employ and test their new toys. Now, of course, sending a bunch of students of noble birth and questionable moral fibre out into the world with bags full of gunpowder and experimental weapons is perhaps not an entirely safe idea, so the students are usually accompanied by a senior gunnery officer or a master engineer, both to, properly evaluate the skills of the student in utilising their weapons and, of course, their inventions, if they should happen to bring along an invention of their own, but also to try and keep them out of the worst of the trouble that they could get their noble little asses into. Now, presuming that the students make it all the way through to their graduation without blowing themselves up, They are then given several options. They can choose to stay on with the school and continue their education in hopes of becoming a senior gunnery officer and then finally a master engineer, or to go on into active service as a gunnery officer. For those of fitting breeding or higher ambition, they can also choose to return to their families and join the Pistol Corps, in preparation for joining one of the Empire's knightly orders. Those who do, however, choose to stay on to become master engineers, though, are some of the most eccentric and progressive individuals in the Warhammer world. At the completion of their basic education, they transfer over to the Gunnery School's sister institute, the College of Engineers. These prospective engineers are few in numbers and come from a wide variety of backgrounds. Because while most of the Gunnery School students are indeed nobles, very few of these nobles choose to stay on and continue their studies, usually choosing instead to continue their climb up the social ladder and an eventual knighthood. Non-noble students have it pretty tough. They have a pretty damn hard time ahead of them, as they will have to constantly prove themselves to be allowed to continue their studies. They, after all, do not have the benefit of vast amounts of money. Alternatively, they could try and find themselves a patron willing to pay their rather considerable tuition expenses. And if that was not enough, they will almost certainly be constantly bullied and pushed around by the noble students who consider themselves far, far above the filthy commoners. Pway! This usually limits itself to just, good old-fashioned bullying and harassment, but incidents of outright violence are not completely outside the norm, and, of course, if a commoner were to harm a noble, even if just by accident, well, we both know who's going to get blamed for that, aren't we? So, as you can imagine, this environment is not one that lends itself overly well towards the pursuit of knowledge, but it also means that those who do make it through are the best and most dedicated of individuals. And with that, I will leave the rest up to my honoured guest, Lionheart.
Hi guys, Lionheart here, and following on from Arch, I'm going to be talking about the College of Engineers. These bright and remarkably dedicated individuals have been responsible for some of the greatest technological breakthroughs in the Empire. The first and greatest of these inventors has to be the founder of the original College of Engineers in Altdorf, the Chilean inventor Leonardo of Miragliano. He invented the steam tank and countless wonderful inventions. These days, there are several such colleges, including one right next to the Gunnery School in Nuln. Unfortunately, Leonardo, just like many of his future protégés, was perhaps somewhat less worried about safety than he should have been. Leonardo and much of his work was lost when he tested out a heavier-than-air flying machine powered by an alcohol engine that unfortunately had a minor malfunction, resulting in the whole thing blowing up and proceeding to crash into the middle of the college. It turns out that hundreds of litres of burning alcohol, accompanied by a few tons of what was at this point an unguided missile, is a pretty damn good way of destroying stuff. Incidentally, it was right after this incident that the city of Altdorf created its first professional firefighting station, right next to the college. Regulations have gotten better over the years, and while mishaps are still quite common, they are considerably less devastating. Teaching standards have also risen considerably over the years, and the staff's experience has also grown, and additionally, the college is now home to many dwarven engineers that have been expelled from their own Guild of Engineers, an organisation that is considerably less liberal than the colleges. These dwarves have rendered invaluable aid to the Empire's technological pursuits, especially within the field of mechanical engineering, where they introduced the Empire to such things as the mechanical clock, the basics of clockwork, and later used to create slightly more advanced and crazy things like the mechanical horse. Most engineers, however, dedicate themselves to creating new and interesting ways to kill a wide variety of enemies with varying results. Some weapons, like the Hochland long rifle, have a long and proven history of excellence. In the case of the long rifle, it combines a refined mix of gunpowder with experimental ammunition, and in some cases a rifled barrel along with extremely advanced and expensive telescopic sight to produce a highly accurate long-range weapon. And as if that wasn't enough, it hardly ever explodes. Another good example would be the repeater handgun and pistol. These weapons use a revolving barrel mechanism to let the user fire multiple times before having to reload. Some of these weapons also come with a mechanism designed to allow the user to simply switch out all of the spent barrels at once for a new set of preloaded barrels. Older versions of the weapon required each barrel to be replaced one by one. On the other hand of the spectrum, we have things like the Pigeon Bomb. Like the name would suggest, this is quite literally a pigeon with a bomb strapped to it. Or more precisely, the pigeon is strapped with a harness from which the bomb is then released. This would presumably let the pigeon avoid getting splattered across the landscape and let the engineer get away with only training one set of pigeons. As you can imagine though, pigeons are not necessarily the most cooperative of animals and don't always take kindly to being trained. And when you're trusting something with a brain the size of a peanut to carry live ordnance around, you'd better be damn sure that you know exactly what that bird brain is going to do with all the TNT you've strapped to it. Furthermore, pigeons are not the most reliable of delivery systems, as the infuriating little feather brains rarely travel at a constant speed or direction, which makes judging how long the fuse needs to be rather problematic. Best case scenario, a misjudged fuse is going to paint the landscape with pieces of bird, but the worst case, the flying pest is going to be landing on its soon-to-be ex-master's shoulder when the fuse runs out. Minor setbacks aside, however, the Imperial Gunnery School and College of Engineers have created countless weapons and inventions that have strengthened and enriched the Empire, and that lets this human nation stand on equal terms with the more monstrous factions of the Warhammer world. And, with the light of reason and science growing ever brighter, who knows what wondrous things they could come up with in the future. If they don't blow themselves up first, of course. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Collaboration between myself and Arch Warhammer. Big thanks to Arch for researching and providing the script for this. Do check out his channel if you haven't already, and feel free to leave suggestions of other topics that we could talk about, discuss, and share with you guys.